Right, you guys, welcome to Sam Talks. Today's call is going to be focused on public forums, public forum building new forms, and just the different settings that are available in SAM for when you're building public forums. So I'm going to be jumping in. What do I want to do? I want it to give me this guy. All right, so close out here. All right, so public forums. I think everyone on the call knows what public forums are, but for anyone listening that may watch us later, public forums are going to be used for end users, and end users for SAM are your clients or people that are outside of your organization that do not have a login to the front door of SAM. So they are not a user that is a paid for account. They are folks that may be your clients. So oftentimes that's adults that can use the software platform, like families or foster families. It may be volunteers. There are definitely folks who use public forums for donations, and donors fill it out. And it may also be used for external partners like counties or state caseworkers that may refer children. That's another type of public forum that we've seen built over the years, where an external partner will literally refer a child and fill out a bunch of detail, creating a child record that then the agency can determine if they can support that child. So public forums are an external view and access to SAM. And when end users have a login, they are connected to SAM through the back door, and they can only see the data and information that you are allowing them to see or to enter. Public forums can be accessed under settings and then forums. And then there's two ways to access public forums. So my favorite way is clicking on type and looking at public forum. You're going to have a whole list of all of the enabled forms, including subforms that are labeled right now in this order. This way they're alphabetized. So there really is, it's very helpful when you're building new forms to get labeling to connect. So things lay out in alphabetical order so you can find the forms that go together. And then these are links right here that are actually going to take us into oh, I disabled this form. I was looking for it, but into the form customizer page itself. There's also this link here. This is from the prior version of SAM. It had public forum links. I think it was actually accessible directly from the settings page, if I remember correctly. It looks a little different than it did in the old version. And I'm going back now a little bit of time, but on this screen, you get the form name. And here, depending on your settings for a form when you're building it, it's going to give you links to open the edit or the view form if it happens to be set as both. If it's set as only one or the other, I think it just says open form. We can look to some of the other ones, and then a link to edit the form. And this is actually within Form Customizer, where you can connect to that specific form. So I'm going to see if I can find, this one says both, where this one happens to be just an edit form, so it's not giving me the option to open the view form because it doesn't exist, right? So it'll limit what options are there for you depending. And then we can access, oh wait, and let me look at one other thing. Like this is a view form And so I'm only getting a view form. It happens to just be set as a view form. You can't edit this particular form. So we're getting that option. Let's find a good one to go to. I'm going to jump. What I really want to do is jump back to the form, view only disabled forms. So you do have choices of on the sidebar here in the forms section to view enabled or only disabled or only enabled forms right now. And I want to go pop over here to this one and enable it. So I'm going under advanced options and enable the form. And then we can look at it because this is a very simple form that people are going to be pretty familiar with. So literally as of last night, all of your sites were updated and we made some changes to some issues that needed to be addressed because a lot of people were mentioning it to us, but there are things that we're working towards. A lot of support tickets come in around form building, form setup. So we have a fairly significant lift of really clarifying form customizer in general and making it easier to build forms so that you guys can control that yourself and get all the settings correct. But we'll be making these in incremental steps. One of the things that we did last night was adjust the sidebar links so that they're a little bit clearer. We're pulling some stuff out of advanced options, things that you need to be aware of and see are going to be in your sidebar on a form customizer. So I'm going to go through some of the settings so that, again, we have common language and definitions around things, and then I'll go into building a form. So once you have fields on a form, which a lot of your forms will already have fields on, so unless you're building a new form, you can use edit form layout. I'm just thinking when I go through and build a form, we'll double check whether edit form layout is directly there because there may not be anything to change and modify if you don't have any fields on the form, which is what's kind of making me question whether or not that's available all the time. But edit form layout, once you have fields onto a form, it will allow you to then move the fields around. You can delete fields, you can move fields to different columns, you can edit sections and reorder the organization of different fields. So we can click edit, we could delete things, and edit that this is specific to the section. And so it's labeled this way versus, if we were changing a field, we're going to actually click on the field and change that in the field properties screen because that's managing a field versus manipulating or modifying how this form looks. But that is what the edit form layout does. Where now I'm just going back to default view. But really, before I do that, the one additional thing that shows up when you click edit form layout is enabling form blocks. And form blocks are used, I believe, only on vertical forms. So where you can have columns and everything gets stacked up vertically. And form blocks will allow you to format the form so that the layout can change from 2 column to 1 column, back to 2 column to 1 column within the rules that Sam lays out. And the rule is really just if you are starting to add subforms to it, subforms are down at the bottom. I think that's the only real rule in this form layout that I can think of that it's like, that's just where they belong. They go, or where they go. They go down to the very bottom, which right here, you can see subforms will be labeled and they are beneath, and there's no way to pull this emergency contact subform up into the middle of this. We would have to take some of these other sections and make subforms to format that. So depending on how your form that you're, usually people are coming from a paper form, and there may be some modifications to that paper form when you come into a SAM layout if you feel uncomfortable or if subforms feel new to you. But subforms have to be down at the bottom. But form blocks would allow us to organize these columns a little bit better. If I enable it, it's going to give us a new block here or drop down for the block, and where do I want to position this? So in this, I might drop this into block 2. I might drop this into block 2. And we'll see like this applicant general information starts to move upwards, and where we can potentially set out these sections to be more, what are the word? Just sort of laid out, exacting. If you're looking at, like, often we see this with parent 1, parent 2, where the sections, you're asking the same fields, but once we start adding in a section that is for the entire family, the applicant 1 and applicant 2 information can start to kind of become no longer aligned and kind of be difficult to utilize, right? So like this, I might pop it up into block 1, and we'll see, right, it's popped up into column 2, but it's not aligned with this one. So it could be a more challenging form for somebody to build because things are just not laid out well. And that's it. And so blocks will allow you to reorganize a little bit better. I'm going to move that down. And so we'll start to see, I just keep getting closer to, and really because I've got this group right, this table here that I need to keep, it's never really going to align unless I move applicant 1 and 2 into a second block. Then they're going to align nicely on top of each other. And perhaps we'll do that. This guy into block 2 and this guy into block 3, because really I just want to like showcase how it can look. So back to block 3, and at some point now we're going to see, right, they are still not aligned exactly because I'm kind of fiddling with this, but these 2 columns are now lined up equally. So even though these 2 are not, these 2 will become lined up with blocks. So it's a useful way to format really lengthy forms that have a lot of information. Public forms have a public form properties screen, which is going to be your form properties screen that has just information around what is the title of this form, what is the public form title, or sort of the alias naming convention, which would be internally. And really, it's more like an administrative form name. Will help you guys as SAM leads find it in your form list. But this isn't going to necessarily mean anything to your families. You may want something that's a little bit more friendly, welcome, you know, to the application for agency name, right? Something like that, that is just a bit more friendly and helpful for people that are actually utilizing this form. You do get to set forms as view and edit. So our last call, we talked about view and edit. View is really for displaying information, especially for public forms. End users cannot edit view forms at all. There's nothing they can do with the specific fields that are there. It is really presentation only. Edit forms will allow them to enter data into the site. For public forms, you'll also manage their login settings. So we'll be changing these, the verbiage a little bit here in the future, maybe making it, or hopefully making it clear. The options here are, there's no login, just no login required at all. And that is going to be only for edit forms. Generally, forms that are set up as edit only are going to be an inquiry form, a contact us form. Some of these child referral forms may have it, volunteer inquiry forms, like really basic information that you're getting. You don't, Well, yeah, you would not have an application form or a form that takes a family or an end user a long time to complete, set up as no login. I would also potentially recommend a policy around your public forms that require some level of confidential data entry as needing to be required as well, a login required. And especially long forms, families could come back to them to log in. So again, really no login should be, you should maybe have one or two public forms that are collecting very basic information that are set to no login. The second option is called login and pre-fill option. This is going to be, for sure, the naming is going to be changed and it'll be login optional. When a form is set as login and pre-fill option, the end user will be able to say, yes, I've been here before and I'm going to log in, or no, I just want to begin the form, and they're going to start. Most of the time I see folks put a password on those types of forms so the family can come back in, but that may be confusing, right? People are at varying degrees of tech savviness. So I would recommend using it fairly sparingly. I think really and truly, if you have a long form, like an application form, which tends to be the second form that a family will interact with in SAM, that these are all become login required. And so then there's a login required option, which is that end user has to log in to access any of the data that's behind that login and being displayed. And the last thing that's here on public forum properties is what do you want to happen with this form once the user hits save? So do you want to display a message, right? We can literally just give them a thank you for coming. I don't know, I'd say that, but your information has been saved and what you want them to do. Saved and, whatever, right? You can share a message and we can look to that of what it looks like. You can also direct the user to a different page altogether. So like you may like a public form going on submit back to your website. And so you can give them more information. You may want to take them to a site that maybe you have a different payment processor and they need to pay for this form and you're going to send them to a PayPal link or a Stripe link or something like that. You could take them to somewhere else. You can also redirect the user to another SAM form. And this is a list of public forms that they can access, not public subforms, but a public main form that they can get to. And so should you have built a form that is not in this list, it's very likely that it's not set as a public form or it is not on a main form. So again, you can't take the user to a sub form. It has to be a main form in order for them to do that. If you make changes, I'm going to leave this right now as no login just so we can access things a little easier. And save over here. We have, again, because we reordered it, right now we've got tables on form. Some things that we see, SAM works extra hard if you have too many tables on the form. And we've even seen where the form, there are issues or like acts in unexpected ways if you have a lot of tables. So you want to have the tables on a form for which you are pulling data or fields from those tables on. So as an example, if I had, home study on this and adoptive child preferences and birth mother preferences, Sam's doing a lot of work to display this information and offer up this information to people. And if I do this, there will become an alert that is going to warn you that's like, hey, you've got too many tables on this form. So if I save here, we will get the warning right here. It's showing you a list of the tables that are displayed there, and it gives you a link back so that you can correct this. Right, and so all we're going to do is pop in here, uncheck the tables that we do not need, press save, and that error or that warning is going to go away. Next down on the list is adding a field. So forms, no form can be accessed if you do not have a field on it, because a field is your data entry point or your data entry display if it were a view only form. So you have to add fields. The choices that are here are based around the tables that you've included on the form when you set it up, or if you go to edit tables on form, then these are the different tables. You can click nowadays, as of last night, and anywhere within this header to open this up, and you get to choose different fields that you want to apply to this form. When you press save, those fields are going to go down to the very bottom of the main form, which is above the subforms right here. So, right, our first subform, or and I think only subform on this screen, is at the bottom. And the two fields that I just added are here, and then I'm able to move them up to where I want. And I'll leave that work email or in contact information. Okay, if I move a field, it goes to the bottom of the section. So you may have to reorder that as well. Okay, and so I'll stick that at number 4. And that, I think we don't really see too many questions come up along that as a necessity, but just to make sure everybody is clear on that, you can add sections. Sections are going to be these blocks, the white blocks that allow you a header. It allows you to enter messaging. Some of our clients have absolutely used the messaging in that really well to explain to their team or end users like their clients or families that come in contact with public forms to help express what kind of information you want, why it is required, whatever. There's any kind of messaging that will help move people through the forms, because the forms that we see built are really, they're fairly extensive forms. So I'll go and add it, and we can title the form, and we can add any information. Need to clarify. We know in our testing right now, if you add a table here, for some reason the site is adding, whatever we find, 15 breaks or 15 spaces, and it makes it look funny. So you'll see that because I'm leaving it on this particular form for my team to test through of what needs to be done so that we can correct that. But if you put basic information in here, it functions well. You have these formatting options here. If you click source, it will give you HTML. And you're going to want to know how to use HTML and write HTML properly in order to actually apply that. If you wanted to add, I believe you can add links here with that. That actually, I'm kind of waffly on because I can't really remember. Let me just see. Solutions. Let's go here. Let's see. And if Kelly, I may need your help with HTML. I can't remember. href equals and this.
And then the link title,
website, and then the closing tag, right?
I believe that is it. Yes.
Nope. Right. So HTML is very finicky with exacting data. I'm just going to double check this if this functions, because I cannot completely remember if that's true, beautiful. It actually will work, but you got to know how to write HTML. Well, let's say I say that it works. They're going to take me over. Cool. It does take me where I want to do. This section will not show up if I don't have a field. So I have to add a field over there in order for that section to show. I'm just going to stick this over here so that it will show up and we can see that when we go and finally open this form. And then the new section, just like the field, is going to go to the bottom of your form. And then you get to reorder it like I was talking about with the edit form layout, changing this into different blocks or columns or sections and field organization as well. Let's go back to the default view. Okay, so before I go into some of these other settings and how to open the form, I just want to make sure you see other things around the screen so you you just know all the bits. There is this form properties accordion. You can click on it. This is going to really tell you how this form was built. So the very top two lines here tell us it's a public form. We've set it as a view and edit. And for what table is it for? These are links. You could access that table and get more information about that table or use it to add fields. So when you add fields here, you actually have to already have built that field on the table in this version of SAM. So you cannot build a new field from clicking add field. And we set that up really purposefully because there's a lot of duplicate fields sometimes when you some of our clients have many administrators of the site. People just don't remember what everybody else built, or they may have their own agenda, or they may be set out to, there's an international and a domestic group go, and there's a lot of processes that are similar within those two programs, probably more so than is different. And so duplicate fields can be built. So we're aiming for reduction of that duplication and that extra effort by putting a pause. You can always right click, open a new tab so that you can check on fields that are available here. In time, we'll be adding search and different things that allow you to find information better, because we even see fields that are built, they may not come off as a duplicate, like having the exact field title, but it's pretty evident that the field means the same thing because just a slight word variation is off. But I see that pretty often, often enough that we wanted it to be really direct when you're adding to your database, when you're building the database versus manipulating forms. So what gets shown here is going to depend on all the various settings. I don't even know. I think, Kelly, you're kind of in this, at least we talked about it, I think, last night, of editing this section. I don't know if you have any more information than I will, because I can only see what's displayed here, but it will tell you other things, like other forms, that a sibling form. This happens to have an internal form that matches the data that's, or the format and layout that's here. And so that's a link that we can see. Where it's used as a sidebar link happens to be on this form. These are all links that are going to get you to that specific form. I believe it tells you also, like, if this form is used after saving another form, the other connected forms. So any type of, or several different types of connections to other forms this has, this form properties accordion will display that information and provide you a link to get to it. So you can access that quickly. It also is telling you the last time a record was entered through the form, and this can help articulate for you whether or not this form's actually being used. And And you can close that up to get it out of your way. Other things that you can do before we go again into these additional settings that are important for public forums is add messaging. I definitely think having more, it's a balance. Messaging is always a balance because people don't love reading, but having some message of welcome can be really helpful for end users who've never come to your forum before, welcoming them, thanking them, providing information on further parts of the process. I feel like this has been used to provide links to external sources for maybe like parent education sources or state regulations, things that are important for the end user to know, maybe other of your web pages. I've seen people add links to and images to videos to help welcome people. So you've got a lot of creativity and a lot of customization options in building your messaging, but it should be fairly easy to access from the public forum page, the form customizer page. You've got message at the top and you've got message at the bottom. There are two edit links. They're in two different spots. I think this is the header. So I'm just gonna label it literally this so we can see it when we open this up. And then same thing for this is our bottom section, text or gratitude and next steps, right? Whatever you want to share with a family, I believe you can add, because there's a source link, you can add HTML, images and icons, links, things like that to get them to where they need to go once they're concluding in this form. Okay, let me take a sip of water. Because we're in a group, we're about 30 minutes in. I do want to get to building a form, sharing the form, things like that. And then certainly go through these options. Just curious if anybody has any immediate questions on what we've covered so far.
So
Fairly
Stephanie,
extensive.
can you tell me where these recordings are being put? Because I had to take a call and I need to come back and watch some of this.
Yeah, the recordings are in the support help guides, and they're under webinars.
Okay.
And webinars by date, and they're really being lined up here. Sometimes if the webinar is a good reflection of what's going on and it fits well in the guide, we'll stick them in a particular guide that it references as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go through here. So use existing case criteria. This is going to tell Sam when to create a new case. So maybe one thing I haven't said yet is the majority of public forums are built on the case. They are. So be it the family case or child case. If you don't have, if the entity type you're building a public forum for does not have a case like volunteer or person, it's generally going to be built on that main entity type. And then this will not apply. So use existing case only shows up when the form is built on a case. There is a default. Let me see if I can open that up. But sometimes the default does not work for your agency and your policies. Okay, like I've seen agencies say, we do these cases, they're taken care of in 30 days because they're maybe home study only, they're given a grant through the state, they have a time frame they've got to finish this on. This is going to probably work fine. Some agencies allow families to apply and take as long as they want. If that's the case, this may not work, because if a family comes back after 13 months, this form is going to add a new case, and that may not be what you really want to be happening with your database. So you need to consider through what makes sense for your team and your policies and programs. You get to change it just like you would with building a report or any other time you're applying filters. And things that I think are reasonable is probably choosing a different date field instead of case entered date is really reasonable. Sometimes case stage is reasonable if, again, your policies and programs allow for an extended period of time for a family to come back to this form. But sometimes if a family inquired 12 months ago, but never finished, withdrew, or the case just closed because there's just a lack of conversation happening, adding a new case may make more sense. But this is a choice that you should make when you're building this page. This used to be under advanced options, and it really is an important step in determining. And again, it's really your policies that are going to set it up, and then testing to kind of understand what is Sam going to do once you when you have families in different situations. So kind of thinking through, how do your families come in, what is allowable, what is not, is just important part in setting this up. This is fine. I don't know that I do case program, but that's how, just in our testing, how that's set up to run right now. Required fields allows you to set requirements. I really think this is a balance, but again, this goes with what data you are absolutely required to get. I've seen forms that have nearly every field is required, which totally makes sense. Your families may struggle with, or whoever the end user may struggle with doing data entry, because the forms can be fairly lengthy and people's attention span is fairly short. So in 2025. So I think it's a balance, kind of a give or take, maybe explaining and messaging. We really need all of this information in order to process further. We may have to come back to you if you have fewer required fields, but you can totally set them up, literally every field here, and it's going to be adding clicks around what's required. There are special requirements where you may have a field like, well, even like middle name right here for applicant 2. Some agencies all the time require a second applicant, some agencies do not. So again, really is policy and program specific, but you can pop in and say, if legal first name is entered, then we're requiring, what was that? Legal first name is not empty. We require the app2 middle name to be entered, right? So the special requirement is set on app2 middle name, and this is what has to be in order. It's similar to building filters. And so it'll work the same way as that, as you just add another field that you want to be required for. We definitely had a bug where this wasn't working. That seems to be, it is now resolved, I believe, on this update either last night or within the last week. So that functions, we know there are 2 other conditions or field types that it doesn't like, and that is a checkbox or a checkbox list. Why they behave differently, not, it's just a technical thing. So those will be coming out in a future release. But we felt really like that the probability of that is pretty low. We tend to see yes, no fields. Have you had counseling? Yes or no? If so, please describe what the situation is. That kind of a special requirement we see on a regular basis, to where you totally could have a checkbox, and it will not work at this very moment, but generally we don't see it. We see it as like a yes, no, or a drop-down list sort of an option. Or just it needs to be not entered. I'm going to leave that alone, not add anything extra on that. Interesting. Refresh the screen. Show table titles. allows you to see what tables. So it's really just putting the table name before the field name. That's all that this is doing. And it allows you to see what fields or what tables you're using. So we use that often when when we're being introduced for the first time to a form, or to reference information about where data is coming from. There is data entry on save. This is on submit. When that end user submits a form, what data entry is going to be entered automatically from the database. So again, kind of thinking through your process, what case stage if somebody completes this form, what case stage does it belong into? I always tell people it's like the boxes on paper forms that say staff only. That's what this is doing, except for your staff don't actually have to enter this unless you feel like they do, and then that's handled a different way. But if there are just data points like the actual date of submission, or we're changing the case stage, or we're setting, you know, an inquiry worker or an adoption case worker as this specific person every time, whether you're deciding they're going to be an active family at this moment in time or not. These settings really vary agency to agency, and you get to determine what makes sense for your team. But setting that up is always really helpful. When these forms are connected to checklists, you do need to do that if you want that checklist item to be marked as complete when the end user submits that form. The last setting that I'll show or talk about here is email notification settings. I do think we're going to deprecate this in time. We will give you ample information, but this right now, you can enable it, tell Sam who to email it to, and what template you might want to append to send an email to that person. And the reason that we would get rid of this particular setting is to eliminate a sidebar link to make our form customizer not feel so complicated. And this exact thing can be done through an auto action. So really choosing one way of doing things to aid our users in customizing the forms for themselves and customizing the system. One way is nice. So we would give ample warning before we do this with, here's a list of your forms that have this setting and things like that. And I think even if we remove it, it's not going to change anything. We're just going to remove the sidebar link so that, again, we don't have multiple ways of affecting the site just in two ways. This just simplify things a little bit. Then let's talk about opening records. So pop back over here. We can open a random record. This is going to open any record. So everybody who has access to Form Customizer is a SAM lead and can see every single record in your site. When I open a random record, I believe because this form is set up as a view and edit, it's showing us the view form. Here is that bug that we know about with all these breaks. So we're working on that. And that's really only if you have a table there that we see that issue. But then this is whatever sample record that we have and kind of how this form lays out. Here's where we have that block where, again, this section here would normally be up here, but because we have a block, it lines up nicely with this section. This is our test form, so the organization of it, don't judge us on that yet. Let's see. So that allows you to just see your form. I need to get clear on if you open a random record and it's a view or an edit only form, what is it going to open? I'm assuming it's going to open an edit form view. Opening the public form edit and view, you're going to have two options right now. If this form is set up as both edit and view, if it's only set up as one or the other, you're only going to get one of those options. And I think it actually simplifies the language, simplifies down to open public form, because it's not giving you a choice between the edit and the view. It is however you set up the form as. So you can open them there. If you have an internal sibling form, that is one setting that I did not talk about that is important for the system. This will open so you can look at the internal view. And so as internal sibling form, let me see if I can find another form real quick. The form is, what did I just call that? New case public form. So any old form or any public form that you have has a link on the sidebar called create internal sibling form. Again, this is gonna make a direct copy of the form that you can then put on an internal form, like a cover page or case details page, anywhere you wanted to link this form so that your team can see the data in the exact format that a family or a client or someone on behalf of a client completed, and you can just see that. All you do is click it and it does it. We refresh the page and then our link changes to open the internal sibling form link. When you open that link, you now know the title of this form. And when you go to a different form to add it as a sidebar link, this is the form you're gonna choose, not the public form, but this internal sibling form for it. Okay, let's build a form because I did not get to that last time to just take you through. We are internally in our team sort of debating on which way to go through to build a form. There are two options today. You can go to forms and create new form. You can also go tables and fields, choose your table, and then right at this moment under advanced options, there's create new form. So I am very tempted to go in this direction and we'd reorganize these sidebar links. And the reason being is table selection is a challenge for most of our clients. What table should things go on? And so before you spend a lot of effort on building forms that don't work out right, the table selection is pretty important. So again, I think we mentioned it last time, and on most things when we're talking about administering the site, SAM is built for adoption and foster care agencies, so the table titles should feel fairly familiar to your team. I think one challenge is we get forms that are really lengthy. Kelly, will you pull up that form and let me know when? Just like tell me or something. That form from New Mercy that is that 19-page PDF. Actually, I might be able to just grab it real quick. Is pop in here. Where is that form? Sylvester, this guy.
Yes. Give me 2 seconds.
I think I got it, Kelly.
Oh,
We
you
get
do?
forms on a pretty regular basis that are really, really long. Like a ton of information is on here. And the first step for us is to say, okay, this group of fields in this client information box belong on what table do they belong? And then we walk our way down the form. So, right, we're talking this bit looks like child data. It's really demographic information, pretty high level bits of information. Referral information, and this is my opinion about it after building forms for such a long time, but referral information is generally case-based information because this child might be referred to you multiple times or the family may be referred to you multiple times. So I start thinking about this as case, placement status, which depending on how we read that, it would be maybe placement date. Then we start getting to just different sections and it's asking lots of different information about, I assume this kid, there's a lot of interesting questions. We're just like kind of looking at this of like, I might actually ask to understand what type of kids, are they working with older kids so that I can clarify that this is child case based data rather than are we talking about a family or somebody in the family, like just to be clear before we go building things. And what I'm trying to see, right? You may, I'm looking at this. This is something we're going to work on. But like you may have a whole table built around education information. And so you'd want to pull that table onto the form, or you may have to build a sub form that is pulling education or like your current education record, depending on what you're actually expecting somebody to enter. So want you to just know that really lengthy forms, not every bit of that is going to be on the family case table. It really may be, right, if you're asking about people in home, or what is your military experience, or your education background, or your employment history, there may be other tables that you're going to pull and build subforms on that will be incorporated into that main form. Okay, and I think that's the biggest challenge here, which is why when I go back to building, again, it's debating. It's debatable of which way do you go. Either way you go, from choosing the table, or if you go to forms and choose to create new form, you're going to be asked for what entity type is this for, and then what specific table are you referencing. So that'll always be information that's important to know. So I'm going to create a new form. I get to name the form. This is our Sam Talks case form. We can choose a different title. We get to determine whether it's view and or edit. I get to also set the layout right here. So am I doing a vertical where I've got my columns and things get stacked, or do I want rows? And do I want it to be horizontal? If I choose horizontal, you are limited to 5 fields across. And so if you want more fields, you have to make it a multi-row form that will allow for many, many rows. And really, there are forms where you might think of them as a vertical, but we put them in a horizontal so that we've got 3 or 4 fields at the top, and then each row just has 1 field in it. So it has a vertical look, but it really is a horizontal orientation. So you get to play with that and what makes sense for you and really your users. Link to form is shown, but it's not applicable for public forms. Once you hit public form, that's going to go away. So this building portion is, we are working towards a wizard to walk you through and make sure that you have every setting that you need to set that up correctly for internal or public forms going forward. Because there are, especially when we get into multi-record tables and building forms off, like off the home study or off of references or something else, there are a lot of potential linkages and things that you may want to set up, that we want to make sure you have the opportunity to see that first. Those things can still totally be done here, but you kind of have to be in the know or use our guides to go through and understand the different settings you have available. So again, very first thing that gets done is adding fields. You cannot create a form without fields. So I'm going to keep this rather simple. I just added fields from the family. I can go between, right, and say, okay, I actually want that, and actually I do want up to information on here as well. I'm pressing Control Enter to save it in, and it's really just building on that one section. Sam is auto entering this as the case. I think it's taking it from the table information. I can edit the section name and call this, applicant details, or whatever I want to call it. And again, apply messaging as needed. I still need to go through all of those different settings. Am I requiring fields? How do I want to order it? Things of that nature all need to be just referenced, right? They are right here on the form customizer. So you'll want to check that. Do you have them all ready to go? Further down, there are other things to build. So let's say this is, we are going to ask them, who else lives in your home? So we're going to add a subform. Trying to deduce. This is a list of, it looks to me like all subforms. It's not filtered to public forms only, but if you add a subform, it does need to be set up as a public form. So you'll want to know, because I'm talking about that, instead of choosing a subform, I'm going to actually go and build a form off a multi-record table so that we can see that change and how that's handled. So I am going to work off of adoptive family household members and advanced options, create new form. So this is going to be Sam Talks, person in home. And I'll just call it to the end user household members. This is when you are working off a multi-record table, you get some different options because these options just don't apply to a case or a table set as one at a time. In this situation, I'm going to ask them, how many records do you want to tell me? How many people live in your home? And so I'm setting it as a multi-record. I tend today like to set things as both view and edit. Sometimes they're just not view. So it just really depends on your process, like what are your, not your process, but really like, what is your purpose of this form? Who's entering this form? What layout do I want? I'm going to keep it as a single row. And then there are form options when you're building a from a multi-record table. Don't want to hide it when empty. In my opinion, doesn't even apply right here, but in some situations it will, won't apply for a public. Actually, it could apply depending on what you're trying to do. You may not want to show families parent education records until you've said this is what the schedule is. So you want to hide that so they don't even know that that exists until it's appropriate. And then create a container form. We are adding it to a main form. So we're not going to set this, but should we be starting from a multi-record table and we don't have a main form we're building on, subforms must be on a main or container form. And any form that's built off a multi-record table that is set up as a multi-record where we're saying I'm going to show more than one record at a time automatically is a subform. And so that will be necessary. Some kind of container form will be necessary, but I have a form it's going on to. I'm going to add some fields. Second, birth date, first name and last name, and relationship, and go. And then I get to reorder. Number 3, I think that looks good. Multi-record forms don't allow you today to set it as a public form because when it was first built, it really wasn't intentioned that way. Under advanced options, advanced form properties, I can go and change the subform, excuse me, not subform, public form from no to yes. And now it will be displayed on my other form. So I'm going back to my main form. And now let me back up a tick. I went subform options, add subform, and I am going to go to Sam Talks, this person in home form, and save it. And now I have added a subform to it. So I have seen subform or forms, main forms with 10, 20 subforms. You can build upon this. You can have subforms within subforms. When you're playing with subforms, I really like to look at one thing at a time. It is easy if you have a complex form to get kind of overwhelmed with a lot of data is at your fingertips right here. So looking at one form at a time, very, very helpful to just manage this little part of the form by itself. Just again, one thing at a time there. I'm really out of time. So the only thing that I want to talk about here is that with my limited amount of time is under advanced options, kind of what's here and what's changed. Advanced form properties is going to give you all those settings that we've been talking about and what our value is for it. Some of them, they can be changed by your team. Some of them cannot. So sometimes it's totally fine for you to set forms as subforms, but that is a choice, an option that really you're going to have to come to our team for, because it's easy enough to change things if your administrators aren't really sure what that means and just do it anyway. That can affect the form's performance and even accessibility. Regenerate form. Regenerate is a tough word. We debate that word pretty constantly throughout our internal discussions around SAM. We've changed it to rebuild form because that's what it's doing, is just really saying all these settings that you've done, if you find that the form does not work the way you're expecting it to, rebuilding the form so that SAM can dump away some extraneous, I don't know, what I call it, just tech information that it no longer really needs, and rebuild it based on what you have actually set up at that moment, can solve a lot of problems. It doesn't solve everything, so should you need more help, you can let us know. You are able to copy the form, create reports for forms. This is like, information I don't think a lot of people see because it's under advanced options. This, I believe, is going to be based on the main form. It's not going to take into account all your sub forms, but it would pull all of the fields on our main form into a report. They're linked, so you can't edit the report without unlinking it, but it's possible and can save a lot of time in report building. You do have a modification history and activity tracking. Modification history is of this form. It's going to show, in this case, a report of every modification I've made this morning on building this form, or most of them. Activity tracking is, I believe, Kelly, I think that you've got this maybe even better than what I understood this as. This is going to show you who has accessed this particular form, like the real form. It's not this modification form customizer page. It's really, once the form is live, who's modified that. And then you can also disable and delete the form. So disabling the form, if you think you're ever going to come back to it, or if you need it for archival purposes, you want to disable it. If you are testing something and it is no longer useful, deleting the form is a good idea, because systems can be quite large after a period of time if your team is active with building new things. So getting things completely cleared out is always, not everybody's like fun thing that they want to do, but it is really helpful and definitely helps your community members as Sam and our team to understand what's real for you guys and what's not used anymore. Form building is huge. With that, I'm gonna close this call because that's a lot of information to digest. And but I will leave it if you have any questions. So I know David, Liana, Kelly, you guys are still on. Do you have any questions on building a public form? There's a lot. No? Good. Yep, you good? Okay, sweet. We do have a call next week. We're going to continue talking about forms. I can't remember. We'll probably need to pick up on whatever we haven't talked about, but I don't know if we were talking about checklists or what, but it is all found at InReachSolutions.com on events. You'll get an email about it as well. So, multi-record forms and settings. It's a loaded topic. They're all, form building is complex. There's a lot to go over. So we'll go through just as much as we can, talk about that. And this webinar will be added to the support guides, so you can re-reference it for next couple months until we change that functionality, making it easier for you to navigate all the different settings you really need to be aware of, which we're hopeful for sure that is a little easier than even what I went through today, because there's a lot of settings, just a lot of settings and potential that you can do. And with that, I was like, thank you for showing up. Y'all have any, let me stop recording.